Thank you. Okay, look, I'm really pleased to continue tonight's event by introducing you to Freddie. Freddie's a principal software engineer in our public markets delivery team. And as her manager, I have the opportunity to embarrass her by just saying that I'm really proud to share the stage with Freddie. And she combines deep technical expertise with a very practical approach to applying AI in real investment and delivery environments. My hope is that everyone takes something really practical away from this session, whether it's a new idea or a different perspective, or simply sometimes it's that something you're already approaching, something that you're already doing is something that someone else isn't doing. And Freddie, on that, over to you.
Hi everyone, and thanks Kelps for the very kind words. So yes, my name's Freddie. I'm a principal software engineer in public markets technology, and I'm the tech lead of the equities technology subdivision as well. A little bit about my background is I did a computer science degree, and then pretty shortly thereafter I joined Schroders. So I've been here for almost 9 years now, and I started in a data science team and worked through kind of a journey of discovering that I actually really like improving processes and removing toil for people, and championing best practices. So that's kind of what has driven me throughout those last 9 years. So I'm really keen to share with you today what I feel actually works and what good use of AI looks like, at least today, because we all know that it's moving very quickly. There we go. So just for a bit of context before I jump into the coding, our AI journey, my team's AI journey in the last 18 months has changed a lot, as I'm sure it has for a lot of you. We started with autocomplete, which I'm sure you're very familiar with in your IDE. You know, you might be typing something and then you get that little grey suggestion come up, and it might be completely not what you were looking for, or it might be exactly what you were looking for, and you just hit enter and it speeded up your typing, and that was great. So the kind of attention there was on your typing, but you as the dev maybe had not much control over it, and it also didn't really have the wide context that we're seeing in sort of later ways of using AI. Then, as time went on, we kind of got into chat, agentic chat, became a bit more conversational. You could generate whole functions. You'd maybe talk back and forth with the AI about what snippets you would like to insert into your code, but you wouldn't have any persistence between your sessions, and the attention was more on sort of describing what it is that you want. And again, you had more control than you did with the autocomplete, but it still wasn't quite at the level that we get with agentic CLI use. So with CLI, we really get to dig into all the tools that come with it. So we have plan mode, skills, agents, hooks. All these things really make it a fully fledged tool. It allows you to design before building. And project memory does persist, and you get that tension on thinking, and the control is really high. And it kind of depends what your role is. You know, if you're a senior engineer, you might be using agentic CLI, or you could, to write standards that you share across your whole team. If you're more junior, maybe you're benefiting from these guardrails that are being written for you. And if you're a project manager or a business analyst, you might be reading the high-level plan that gets generated and getting an insight that maybe you didn't get before, when only code was available to you. So I'm going to demo now some plan mode. Here we go. So let's imagine building out a greenfield meetup API. So I've got Claude open here, and I'm using the plan keyword. And I'm specifying that I want to build a full meetup API. Let's just pause that there. Events, RSVPs, capacity, waitlist, auth, error handling. And I'm going to ask it, can you help me explore approaches? So notice that I'm not immediately saying, just do it. We're in plan mode, so we're going to iterate back and forth before any code gets written. So you can see here, before it even gets started, it asks me for some clarification questions. So it's asking me what language or framework do I want to build this in? I go for Fast API because that's something I know that my team uses. Asks what database I want to use. Again, for this, I'm making a prototype, so I'm going to stick with SQLite. And then we go through the other clarification questions. Auth, I'm going to use API keys, again, just a prototype for the moment. And it indeed asks me what's my target and scope for development. So I'm going to say it's a prototype. So then I'm going to allow it to run and build my plan. So you can see it gives me a plan. And again, on the left there in the File Explorer, there are no files being created. I'm strictly in plan mode. So here you can see it's a human readable. Yes, granted, you might be slightly on the more technical side if you're reading through this, but a human readable summary of what it wants to do. This represents kind of like shift left, you know. It's so much easier to iterate on a plan before any code is built. If you go into coding, just say, code me something at quite a high level, like I did when I started this plan mode, and then later I want to bolt on extra things, what you'll find is you end up with an inconsistent quality of code across the code base. So planning and iterating from the start really enables you to build something high quality, and additionally you can request peer review on something that other people can read without having to trawl through code, essentially. So just having a look at what it's generated for us, it's got a project structure, which is nice. We've got a database schema, and we've got some API endpoints. So I can have a look here, just check that they make sense. You know, I want to get events, list events, post events. Yes, this all looks like what I would expect from my initial prompt. However, if I'm going to use plan mode in the way it should be, iteratively, I'm going to ask it a clarification question. So I'm going to ask it, does this plan, sorry, that went quickly, but does this plan handle concurrent RSVPs? Just an edge case that popped into my head while reading through the plan. So it comes back to me and says, good question. Thank you, Claude. And it talks about how the plan partially addresses this, but highlights some trade-offs. And it asks me what I want to do about that. So it asks me if I want to just ignore it, add an explicit note to the plan, or use a different database. For context, it says that the SQLite actually serializes all writes to the database level, so that's kind of the actual technical behind it. So, you know, with my tech knowledge, I can read through that and make a decision either way. I think I decided to put the note in the plan. So we've got this updated plan with my, my note about RSVP concurrency. And then I'm going to ask Claude using a keyword, ultrathink, to think about every edge case that I might not have thought of. So Claude has quite a few keywords, but essentially this triggers a deep reasoning mode, which tells it to think very carefully, ultrathink if you will. Sometimes I wish I could ultrathink, you know. It tells it to think hard about everything that the unknown unknowns, essentially. And this is really, again, preempting those things that might become bugs down the road if you hadn't thought about it now. So here it's generated me a huge list of edge cases. So again, you know, I'm going to read through this very carefully, think about what it is that I actually want to incorporate into my plan. Again, because this is a demo, I just pick, it makes a point about storing date times as UTC in the database. So I'm just going to implement that because that is the only edge case I care about right now, because this is just a prototype. Finally, I'm happy with the plan. Oh, key point actually. I've decided that I want to write this plan to a file in the repo root. Now, this will essentially write this whole text that you see here as a markdown file, and then I can forward that to my colleagues. I can include it in a pull request description, essentially just formally recording the plan that generated the code that's to come. So now you can see I've told the plan to go ahead, and it's generating the code. You can see the files start appearing on the left in my file explorer. You can also see that plan marked down in my root. You may be able to tell that this has been sped up some. An actual live demo, I think, might have taken a bit longer, although I have to say much faster than I would have written it myself from scratch. So it tells me that all 13 tests that it has written, which again was highlighted in the plan, pass cleanly with no warnings, and that the API is fully implemented and working. And it also tells me how I can run it. So here I am just running Uvicorn to set up the API locally. And I can click on that local host and see the Swagger docs here. So that's just been generated based off purely a back and forth plan, and then me saying, go ahead and do it. So I'm just clicking through the Swagger docs, just checking that everything looks the way I expected it, and you can see the schemas at the bottom here as well. So I'm just going to close the server, the API, and have a quick look through the files that it's generated. So you can see here, it looks good. Looks sensibly written, looks like decent Python to me. There's type hints. Yeah, it looks all right. I'm pretty happy with this, although I have noticed that there are some things that don't actually align to the best practices that my team chooses to follow. That is because when I kicked off my plan mode, I didn't actually prompt Claude in any of the best practices that I prefer. So this feels like a good opportunity to utilize a skill. So before I jump into building the skill, a skill is a file of standards which bridges sessions. So typically, if you're in like an Ubuntu system like I am, you might have your skills saved in your home folder, your home.claude folder, and that is accessible by Claude in any sessions. It avoids me having to reprompt in every session. So if I wrote into a prompt what I wanted my best practices to be, it would be manual, forgettable, and it eats up some of my context window. Skills are actually loaded as a catalog, so Claude only loads the skill when it perceives it to be relevant, which saves you your context. For creating skills, I actually recommend the skill creator skill, which is quite meta, but it's a great starting point. So you can see here I'm invoking it. I've already got it installed. I say create a skill called my team's standards. Very inventive, I'm sure you can agree, which encodes Python standards my team follows. So you can see it asks me a couple of clarification questions again, and this will be baked into that skill that I've got installed. What Python standards does your team follow? Do you want to just describe them? Do you have a file that you can give me? Do you want common defaults? So I've decided that I just want to describe them in plain words. And then it asks, when do you want it to trigger? Now, skills actually are invoked when it's perceived that they're useful. I think I've already said that. So I just want it to trigger anytime any new Python code's written. So anytime Claude starts writing some new Python code for me, it's going to look at this skill and utilize the standards encoded there. So it gives me some ideas, but I know what I want. So I'm going to write that we strictly follow PyPate standards. We always use UV for package management. We use PyTest for testing. We do not require doc strings, only if they're functional. And finally, we use rough for formatting. Oh no, and we use loguru for logging. So the skill creator goes away and creates a skill for me. And so I've chosen not to continue test it. It offered to test it for me as well. I've skipped that part. But I'm now going to go back to my Meetup API. And while skills are invoked just through using Claude, I choose actually to invoke it directly here and ask it to review the code. So you can see here, it's given me a bunch of points that it's noticed that it needs to change. It wants to add logging with Loguru for me. It wants to remove the requirements.txt and use UV instead, so it's going to use a PyProject. So I'm just reading through this plan. It looks good to me, so I'll say yes, go ahead and do that. And you see again those files changing on the left. So it gives me a summary of what it's changed, and I can be happy that when I go to do this again in the future, I can use the same skill and not have to type that out again. I can even share that markdown file with my team, and they can use it in their own setups. So, unlike skills, agents are also, well, like skills, they're a markdown file, but unlike skills, they are invoked directly. So where skills kind of encode standards, agents tend to encode processes that we want to follow. So for this example, I'm actually going to build the agent directly rather than using a skill to build one. I'm just going to go straight into my Claude folder and create an agent. I have a markdown definition copied and pasted into my clipboard, so I'm just going to paste that into the agents file that I make. I'm going to call it PR readiness. So I want to invoke this anytime I'm about to create a pull request, and it will give me an assessment of whether my code is ready for a PR. You see here, I've just pasted that in, so you can see the bottom of it there. I've got documentation. Claude MD is up to date with any new endpoints or patterns. Any new environment variables are documented. A final check, so that's just the bottom of the file there. So you can see here, I've got my agent and it's invocable directly. And I'm just going to ask it if this project is ready for a PR. So you can imagine using different agents for different lenses, perhaps one for security, one for performance, one for correctness. Just have it go through a checklist. So you can see here, it's told me a couple of items. It's not ready. There are 2 blocking issues, and then it has a couple of issues that it doesn't consider blocking, but might be worth tweaking. So it says, you know, your database mustn't be committed. Put that in your git ignore, which I think is a good recommendation. So I allow it to go ahead and do what it suggests. You may or may not have noticed that I am running Claude with dangerously skipped permissions. That's not something I can recommend in good conscience, but if you are working in an environment where you're not really worried about anything breaking, it can allow you to work really quickly. Okay, so that covered skills and agents, but you may have noticed something that they have in common, which is that they are both markdown files, and they're just stored in your local directory, so that allows developers to tweak them. So just showing you here, this is in my Claude folder in my home directory. You can see my team standards file that I created is just a Python file, just a markdown file. I can change this completely if I wanted to. Obviously, I'm not a bad actor, but I could be. And that essentially would just mean that it, you know, in the best case scenario, it might just deviate from what I'm sharing with my team, or vice versa. So that's where plugins come in. Plugins are essentially a way of packaging skills, agents, hooks, and are distributed by Git. So you have one command to install them, and they can't be modified locally, which introduces this level of governance. So if I were publishing a plugin, I could then make changes to it, and then my team could download the latest, install the latest version of the plugin, and just have all the up-to-date stuff. So we actually do have a plugin in our team, Public Markets Tech plugin, and it has a couple of skills underneath it, you can see here, and an agent. So the agent is requirements gatherer. Most of them are kind of self-explanatory from the title. Requirements gatherer, when invoked, has a back and forth with you about what requirements you might like to suggest for the PR you're working on, the feature. PR creator, again, these, as I said before, skills are kind of invoked when it's perceived that they're needed. So when you're creating a PR using Claude, it will look at that skill and use those standards that are encoded there. Address PR comments and humanize are both fairly self-explanatory. Humanize I really enjoy. It's one that essentially tries to remove signs of AI writing in your text. And task list just encourages Claude to break down tasks into a list of items. So then we get on to MCPs. These are MCP servers. It stands for Model Context Protocol. And it lets an AI call external tools within your session. So for example, GitHub MCPs allow you to create PRs, read issues, and check CI statuses from within your AI. Other examples include Jira, Slack, and even internal APIs. Now, building an internal MCP server is not actually something that our team has tackled yet. I do think it would be interesting. There's also, obviously, security considerations with utilizing MCPs in your business. If you are calling out to external APIs using an AI, you just have to be sure that you're not sending any sensitive data. So that is a consideration when using MCPs. You can also configure which servers are available to you per your project in your settings. So now we get on to config, cost, and usage tracking. I think these are really important components of good practices because they affect both security and budgeting, which are really important, especially in a regulated industry. So configuring Claude, settings actually exist at 4 scopes. So starting from the bottom there, you can have in your user directory, like I was showing, in your .claude folder, you can have a settings.json. And then you can have one at project level, which you might push to Git. You can have a local one, which is sort of a personal overrides for projects. And then probably most importantly, as we talk about moving from maybe individual use of AI to more governance and a holistic approach, is managed settings. And these are the priorities at the top. So, if your managed organization-wide enforcement denies something, I believe that will trickle down. But the permissions are merged across all the scopes. Here is a little demo of my Claude status line. So just there at the bottom, you can see which model I'm running, and also a dollar amount and a token upload and download. So you can see here that that's defined in my settings, which you can do yourself very trivially. I did not write this myself. Again, I iterated with Claude in order to write the status line. And the other really cool tool I've found is something called CodeBurn, which is installable and allows you to create a report per AI provider. So you can have a little look about what your daily activity is, by the project, by your model. You see I've spent a lot of time in Opus 4.6. That's a note, actually. For iterating on plans, quite often like a larger model is a good idea. And then when you're actually executing a well-written plan, you can save a bit of money by using a smaller model. So just touching upon what's next for us. You saw the PM Tech plugin. I think what would be great is to have a centralized plugin library across the organization. I do believe that might be in progress at the moment, but I think it would be really useful for lots of people to contribute. Autonomous background agents for tests and docs. Just being able to get agents to spin up stuff. I think especially in sort of remotely, in your repo, in your GitHub repo, being able just to spin up agents to write tests and documentation would be really valuable. Again, I think that's in the works. And then the other day, someone demoed Claude Workflows to me, which was very exciting. Essentially, is a multi-agent orchestration. So it's scripted fan-out pipelines. Essentially, you can run in the background tens of agents, sub-agents that get spun up to achieve something really quickly. So I think that's what I'm quite excited about to experiment with next. So in closing, I think my key takeaways are design before you build. Plan mode turns just start coding into a peer reviewable spec. I think that is just truly invaluable when it comes to working in teams. With AI, I think a lot of us probably have experience trying to read through a huge amount of AI gen code, and it's kind of a bit difficult sometimes. When you design before you build, you not only can you share ideas with each other, but you can also critique them and make sure that you're generating something that makes sense. Encode your standards, don't repeat them. Skills and agents turn shared but ephemeral knowledge into versioned files. Rather than relying on processes and human error, let's just write that stuff down and make sure that we're all using it. Governance scales through tooling, not process. So plugins distribute consistency without relying on human review alone. And I think, one that I haven't written here, but just overall, I think that AI changes speed, but it doesn't change the fundamentals of good software engineering. A lot of the things, as I was writing this demo and recording it, just kind of, they hark back to pre-AI good practices, right? Like we should be discussing user stories before we actually write a feature. So designing and iterating as far left as possible is just an easier and cheaper way to iterate. So I think just keeping that in mind when you go ahead and use these tools is the best way forward. Thank you very much.
Can we just get one more round of applause for Freddie, please? Absolutely Greek to me, but I'm sure it was very amazing. I want to say a very quick thank you to everyone who kind of came behind the scenes to organize this. Sophia, Haley, Bex, and Josie, thank you for being instrumental in the background. Thank you. Also, a quick thank you to all of the IT people in the background who also were helping through all of the issues this evening. Thank you so much. And then lastly, Selena, Lucia, and Lisa, thank you for being our speakers this evening. And then obviously, Calbs, thank you so much for moderating the event. One more last round of applause, please. Okay. That draws the evening to an end. I hope that obviously it was a good conversation. We would like to continue the conversation for anyone who wants to stick around. There is going to be alcoholic drinks outside for anyone who'd like to have a drink and some food. So please join in the conversation and have a chat outside.